Let me just orientate myself here. There we go, okay. I don't think I could have paid Adrian to do a better introduction, actually, to what I'm about to speak about today. And I'm going to take it as a good parallel to the worlds of a practitioner and an academic. Because what we're seeing in Victoria at the moment is that we're putting into practice a lot of the things that the academic world is actually talking about. And from a social marketing perspective, what is our role when we're talking about big social change? How do we fill those gaps? It's a complex dilemma. It's a wicked problem. But let me just orientate, given our international audience, where I come from, which is the state of Victoria. We are here, and I operate in there. And it is a challenge, as well, as Adrian said, how our jurisdictions sometimes do not work collaboratively, and the importance of doing that. But my role is how we take that systems approach, what we call a systems approach, and work collaboratively in my state. We've done that, importantly as well, almost without putting 100% confidence in it, possibly the world's largest randomised comparison trial in the world, where we're looking at deep public health interventions at scale within 12 individual communities. But not only that, so we've got deep research and evaluation happening in those 12 communities, but also in comparison groups, but equitably as well, where there are statewide initiatives and efforts happening across the state, but deep, high-dose prevention efforts happening within those 12 communities. I'm going to share with you today my 5 key takeouts, which matches the 5 years I've been grappling as a team as well on this complex and big problem. Creating a common understanding of what social marketing means. And hopefully, by the end of these 2 days or by the end of your experience with the conference, you'll have a deeper and bigger understanding of what social marketing is. The power of research. It's an amazing and complex beast with people like Adrian and experts that have been dealing with these complex issues for such a long time. And commercial marketing practice does this so well, so why don't we? The importance of a brand, the importance of competing with multiple brands. If corporates didn't think that a brand would work, why invest so much money? Because it does, so why don't we? Creating coalitions, an amazingly powerful platform for change. And also knowledge. Knowledge capture, but also knowledge cultivation. It's not a static thing. In government, it's hard to talk about social movements. It's hard to talk about revolutions, but we're happy. We are happy to stand up tall and say that we need a revolution. We need to move people and we need to move institutions. For without this, we're not going to be able to address those complex, social, messy, deep problems, but we need to do it together. Obesity, as we know, as Adrian said, is a big, wicked and messy problem. We all care deeply about it, I'm sure, particularly when we look at our childhood obesity rates. The future generation that possibly has the first time that they've got a shorter lifespan of the previous generation. In Victoria, we're certainly not immune to this, with over 60% of our population, of our adult population, overweight and obese. Children, almost a quarter, 25% of our children are overweight or obese, and 95% don't eat enough fruit and vegetables. Amazing, powerful figures. So when we look deep into those figures, though, what does it mean? Let's take our aerial shot. Let's have a look at the systems. Let's have a look at the environment that people live in to understand what influences those behaviours. We talk about behaviours, obviously, a lot in social marketing. We talk about influencing those behaviours, but we also need to be cognizant of the environments that surround the people. Fresh food outlets in this scope. So this is real. The density of fresh food outlets as opposed to takeaway outlets, as opposed to alcohol outlets. You don't even have to live anywhere for there to be an alcohol outlet. How can we as social marketers contribute to fighting this complex and wicked problem? It's easy for someone, obviously, to drive back home from work and put a hamburger that they've bought from the takeaway shop and a beer on the fridge than it is to put fresh vegetables in the fridge or an apple in the fruit bowl. familiar because Adrian put it up already. The Foresight team, and without going too much across what Adrian said, spent a lot of time mapping what obesity means and the various influences of obesity. It is complex, it is wicked, it is messy, it is deep. But what we start to do when we start to take an aerial view of this, like Adrian's already said, is there are certain domains of influence that we can start to look at. And from a social marketing perspective, how can we cut across all these individual domains and start making sense of them? Where are the most important points of the intervention that we can intervene for greatest impact? So suddenly we need to look across the system, not just one particular point. Yes, it's important to have a clear message. Yes, it's important to have a clear behaviour, but we also need to understand that we work in complex, messy systems. And this is the definition that Foresight put against complexity. And complexity is a key thing that we're operating in Victoria. And it is that comprehensive portfolio of interventions which alone might not create significant impact. Advertising alone will not have impact. I'm sure that message will be drummed into you over the next couple of days. However, when we start to have complementary and reinforcing actions, short-term action and impact we'll start to see, but also more importantly is that long-term sustainable change. So we need to see ourselves as part of the solution, not just the solution in its own right. So this conversation and the discussion of systems is commonly where the literature ends. But over the last 5 years in Victoria, we've actually started to take these theories, these principles, and actually putting them into action and making sense of it, making sense of what a complex systems approach needs to look like and what a complex system approach looks like on the ground. There are many academics and many theorists that could probably do a better job at explaining systems theory than I. But this is a really interesting example, I think, of how we can work at systems within our community. And it's done by one of our 12 Healthy Together communities. And hopefully it'll bring the concept of systems thinking to life just a little bit for you. Rick, if you wouldn't mind.
This is Mohammed. You can call him Mo. He's into soccer, riding his bike, and playing with his friends at school. Mo goes to a local primary school where all the kids, teachers and parents are learning to be healthy together. Mo says it's easy to be healthy at school with so much going on. Just the other day, the mayor came to school and awarded them their first Achievement Program recognition sign for their efforts to improve healthy eating and physical activity. Mo's dad, Joe, is a stay-at-home dad. He learned how to cook healthy meals with other dads at the local community centre. Yesterday, he brought home a roast chicken and fresh veggies grown in the community garden. Joe's healthy dumplings were a hit at the big healthy lunch at the factory where their mum works. Rose is on the Staff Health and Wellbeing Committee and she has joined the 10,000 Steps Challenge with her workmates. Even Mo's baby sister, Amina, is learning about being healthy together from picture books during story time at the library. At school, Mo learned that there are more than 16,000 kids his age involved in the local Healthy Together Achievement Program. With all their families, friends and workmates, that's almost half the entire local population. Mo wonders just how healthy everyone will be. Sometimes in the park or at the pool on weekends, with so many families out being healthy together, Mo thinks he can see the beginnings of strong, healthy, happy community, and his grandfather thinks he sees it too. It reminds them that they can be healthy where they live, learn, work and play. For more information on Healthy Together Greater Dandenong, visit greaterdandenong.com.
So what we've seen and what we're trying to bring to life again in Victoria is that real concept of interconnections, of interlinking, of not just one effort, but multiple efforts by multiple organisations at multiple levels. It's super important, and it's things that I think, if I need to leave with you with one concept today, and it's that, we alone are not going to solve the world's woes, and it's not going to happen. But if we start looking at our networks, it's very important to access them and to leverage them to start creating the big social change that we're looking at doing. In parallel, again, the academics and the literature are coming out to really kind of endorse the approach that we're taking in Victoria. So we're talking about The McKinsey Global Institute have actually now come out with a report recently in the last couple of months that talks about the importance of comprehensive systems, multi-interventions delivered at scale. Education, which is a key one for us obviously, along with changing social-wide norms and environments. So again, it's not just individual, it's the environments that they're a part of. If you cast your mind back to the hotspot of the takeaway food outlets, the fresh food outlets, the alcohol outlets, that's what we talk about when we talk about environments as much as anything else. And it's a combination of top-down, corporate and government, business coming together. I want to hear business relationships coming out of today, coming out of like the inspiration of connecting. Getting tobacco out of the room in the obesity space isn't going to work. How do we work together with those corporates to really solve the problem together? And bottom up, key. The key to community level change, the key to big change. The communities know their audiences, they know their needs, they know their barriers, they know their blockers. They work in this day in, day out. They've got the relationships. So we need to work with those community organisations that know their audiences best. And experiment. Experimentation and not waiting for the perfect solution. A little bit like today really actually, because I only got the call to present about 2 weeks ago. And embracing systems, embracing complexity, embracing messiness, I took on the challenge. And while I'd love to deliver perfection, I'm probably not, particularly if it's my first time, but as experimentation, as a proof of work, and hopefully a very powerful message that will inspire a few of you here today. So when I look back to 5 years ago, this is where I started. What was social marketing's role in a complex systems intervention? No mean feat really to try and put a definition around that, really. Not only that, but even before my first official interview, my challenge was to create a movement, a social marketing movement that was worthy of conference presentations, of papers, of lectures. So obviously today is actually quite a milestone, because we are here today to talk about that. So back again to the 5 key takeouts, and looking at the first one, a common understanding of social marketing. How important is this for all of us? It sets the expectation in the room. It sets the general understanding of in the room about what we talk about when we talk about delivering social marketing. One of the things that I've learnt in my last couple of years is the concept of a boilerplate, a 2 to 3 line sentence that summarises exactly what the purpose of that document is, what the purpose of the intervention is. And it's a discipline and it's a process that brings your stakeholders along the journey with you. It allows you to start with experimentation, but also develop the knowledge collaboratively to come to an end point, to come to a shared view around what it means. And for us, our boilerplate was more than 2 or 3 sentences around social marketing, but it was important to really digest and understand the immense wealth of knowledge and research and papers that were out there, many created by the people that we hear today. So we started our point with principles, 8 key principles, some of which are very familiar, some of which form the basis of just good business practice, of good public health practice. But what happens from a social marketing viewpoint? What are the key differentiators in social marketing that bring a social marketing lens to a consistent problem? What we started to find and what really stood out high were 4 key elements: citizen-centric, behaviour-focused, value exchange, and ongoing research. Common practice, and I won't say speak on behalf of many people, but there is a tendency at times to deliver programs, deliver interventions with the 4 people in the room within the 4 walls. But what social marketing does is force us to look outside of the world that we know it, and into the world of the people that are actually on the street, into the world of the people that are driving past all those takeaway food outlets, all those alcohol outlets on their way home. We can have ads on the radio that talk about turning my life around, toxic fat is bad, but when we start looking through the eyes of the individual, we start to understand their world, and we start to understand how we can intervene better in their world, which brings us to the behavioural focus. We do really need to have a single behavioural focus in mind, and that is also what social marketing practices tells us. And importantly though, is the concept of value exchange. Probably the single most valuable principle that we're working against here. And the biggest shift that we've found, particularly working within public health, and what makes social marketing different is the concept of value exchange. It's the value proposition. I spent so many years, weeks, trying to nut out a value proposition to how to sell a car. What is my platform? What am I going to give my creative team to give them a direction around why people are going to buy a car? We need to think about that again through the eyes of the consumer, through the eyes of our citizens. And the way that we do that comes back to research. Research to inform the world that our citizens live in, the behaviours that we need to try and influence, and the value proposition, or what is valuable to them, and how we can go about and set about influencing that. One of the things that struck me in an effort that I was involved in around diabetes prevention was that people don't care about dying. They care about living, but having an impact on the families and the networks that they operate within. If they're going to have a stroke, they'd actually prefer for that stroke to kill them than to debilitate them, and for them to start putting an overburden on their families, on their friends, on their networks. Pretty powerful stuff. You wouldn't expect it. You wouldn't expect to come into a research session and a focus group on the other side of the window to hear about that. But that's real life, and that's the element, and that's the level that we can gain from bringing in a social marketing approach to the problems that we are trying to face. Research is powerful, but also never static. We need to lift our gaze and consider the multiple approaches of what social marketing means and what the social marketing research points us to. So to lift our gaze, again, and to understand this concept of social marketing, we looked at defining what social marketing meant. At the same time, the International Social Marketing Association was also struggling with their definition, or building their definition. And in parallel, we really supported and contributed to that development of the definition, but for a few key reasons. The key reasons being marketing concepts, the power of marketing concepts and other approaches to influence behaviours and communities in an ethical, equitable and sustainable manner. Key for government to be able to really drive sustainability, equitable access to our resources, to our efforts in an ethical manner. But the single most important word there is approaches. Approaches bringing us back to that concept of multiple levels, multiple interventions at scale. Very key to what we've done and what we keep doing. Which brings us to power of research. Critical, but not the be-all and end-all as well, as the wonderful Steve Jobs reminds us of. And also of Henry Ford. We need to understand how we can use research not only to look back, but to look forward, and the importance of not getting stuck within it as well. But to break down data, and long-standing data, particularly within public health, was one of the things that was, from a personal perspective, a really difficult task, because we had so much data. We had all this data, particularly from an epidemiological perspective, a word that I'm still struggling to say. But what did that mean? And how can we, as social marketers, use it? In Victoria, this is what we did. In Victoria, we have an amazingly rich, powerful data source from a state government perspective called the Victorian Population Health Survey. Started a number of years ago, and has been quite an ongoing evaluation and research process. Started at 7,000, but now up to 30,000. Collected, I think, every 3 years. And that's broken down by regions, by 8 regions within the state government, or within the state of Victoria, which can then be further broken down into 33 areas, and then further down again into 79, or even postcode areas of 650 across the state. Even if we look at an ABS, or the Australian Bureau of Statistics way of looking at a national sense, 8,790 parts. But what's new, what we did with a social marketing perspective, is we introduced the lifestyle segments. We introduced the way that we can look through the lens of the individual, the citizen-centric focus of our model, and understand and bring the lens of behaviour, bringing the understanding of knowledge, attitudes, barriers, beliefs to our data, So not only are we seeing why there is a problem, but how we can start to solve it. Very important. So we started with a sample size of 4,200. 4,200 to try and link and data link what we start to see as big data in the world, in order to move our understanding of our population groups at scale. So we start to move from a map that looks like this for a particular social problem to a map that looks like this, granular, direct. We start to understand and see where the linkages are at our systems level, the interconnecting nodes, to understand better where we can intervene. We can intervene from a social marketing perspective, but also importantly from a public health perspective. How can we influence our communities at scale on the influences and the behaviours that we are actually trying to change? And it's also learning how to use our research in multiple ways. It's not just to inform the breakdown of that infographic or the breakdown of a particular problem, but we used it to inform brand when we were developing our brand. We used it to inform messaging, important and key, to really again embed that value proposition, the citizen-centric, the behavioural focus. I mean, how do we do that if we don't have the research base and the evidence base to start from? Policy and program development, key. Key to start bringing that behavioural focus and that citizen-centric perspective into program and policy development. Segmentation modelling. Again, one key asset through the work that we've done in the past 5 years is create what may be the state's first behavioural-based segmentation model for lifestyle, healthy eating behaviours in the state of Victoria, which looks a bit like this. So we've got 12 segments, but 3 segment types. So again, we start to really identify and connect with individuals. We start to connect with their groups. We start to understand patterns. We start to see patterns. But it's important that this is not just from a social marketing perspective. Social marketing has led us to this. We are now at a stage where we need to share our story across the system, across our stakeholders, to bring these segments to life. We need to make these sing. We need to understand how to unlock what the power is within these groupings, within these messages, and then we need to start integrating them and interconnecting them with that big data source that we have and that we continue to bring. Now, I'm pleased to say that we are on the way to that, because what we did here, and in part, it was actually a safe to fail. It was a safe to fail around understanding how to embed knowledge, attitudes, behaviours, beliefs into research that government was doing to better understand population groups. Now, as part of, if you cast your mind back to the deep intervention that we were talking about within the 12 Healthy Together communities, we've got research. We are going out collecting information on those groups, on those individuals that live within those communities and within the comparison communities. We are now starting to see a good amount of questions being asked around knowledge, around attitudes, around behaviours, around beliefs, to really understand those concepts of social norms, the concept of habit formation, and what does that mean at a policy level perspective, pushing it up as part of this narrative around big social change, around revolutions, around how do we move people, institutions, structures, environments. Without that, then social marketing is going to have little impact. It's going to only have impact when it's on air. But suddenly what we see is we start to see integration of marketing concepts and principles across the way that we work, not just as social marketers, but as policy people, as health promotion officers, as evaluators, across the system, across the workforce, and that's key. And it's key if we're going to have an impact across big, messy, wicked problems. And then the concept of big data. We're not stopping there. We keep collecting and interlinking. As government, we have massive amount of data. How can we open that data? How can we operate off open data sources to really drive powerful insights and powerful change? What we're looking at doing now is looking at 10 years of data, which contain 550 variables, linking those variables to almost 10 million records. Imagine the power of that segmentation. We've got the beginnings of that segmentation. We know our 12 types. They're not going to change. It was actually quite fascinating. Part of the Swap It campaign, part of the National Partnership Agreement way back when, was that the national or the federal government did a segmentation model. Now, possibly a little bit rushed, but they had their own time constraints. But what we found is we spent a little bit more time developing our segmentation. We went a little bit deeper. Our sample size was a bit bigger. But there were so many similarities. So that endorsed, and again, kind of was a nice checkpoint for us to say, hey, we're onto something here. Same thing when our Healthy Together communities received their research, when they received their segments, and we gave them their top 3 types that characterised the 3 types that were most prevalent in their communities. Now, obviously that changed to a certain degree. Some of them said, not quite sure if I believe you, Roberto. So let us test that. Let's see if you know our communities better than what we do. And lo and behold, their research actually, again, confirmed that the 3 types that we'd identified for them were actually correct. So we've got an amazing sense of confirmation of what the track and travel that we're working on from a research perspective, from a data perspective, from an epi perspective is good, is solid, is foundational. And then we start to see governments work in this space of big data. Which brings us to importance of brand. Importance of brand from a public health perspective, or from a government perspective, or really from a societal perspective. If it didn't work, corporates wouldn't do it. It is a crowded house. It's difficult. Are we small fish or are we big fish, like Jeff was talking about yesterday at the book launch? Well, if we have any hope of being a big fish, we need to unite. We need to unite and have united efforts. We need to operate across the systems together, creating a single voice, a joint platform, a platform of change. Now, those words were being spoken about whatever we were going to call this thing in Victoria. They weren't talking brand language. They were talking how to do good, solid, systems approach public health. Well, from a social marketing perspective, they're talking about brand. But like any brand, we're not talking about that logo that appears in the top left-hand corner of the page. That's a logo, that's a brand mark. Yes, that's important, the colours are important, the voice is important, the message is important, but the shift that we have spent quite a bit of time, and we continue to do so in Victoria, is shifting the perspective of logo, a style guide, to brand. A brand is a living, breathing thing. It's like a person. I love this quote from, again, the darker side of Procter & Gamble, but important. You know, a brand is like a person. When you meet a person, you're going to have a certain impression of it, so you need to make sure that impression is good. But that impression is going to change over time. The more you see them, the more you interact with them. You're going to like them, you're going to hate them, you know, maybe you're going to vary somewhere in between. But the important thing is to stay in their heads, to stay in their minds, to continue that relationship, to continue to build that relationship, and particularly be very clear on what you stand for. Now, when I was talking about this concept of branding, it was very challenging for the policymakers, for the people in traditional government to think brand, because there's such a major intersection between brand and the intervention itself. But Roberto, we're talking about the intervention, not the brand. It's okay. It's one and the same thing. It's deeply interconnected. And it was a big shift and a big understanding and a big light bulb moment. We talk about aha moments. And when people start to become comfortable and confident that the intersection between brand and intervention doesn't really matter, it is one and the same thing, then we start to talk about a powerful narrative. And it allows me and allows social marketers to really drive that value from a branding perspective. And to be true to your brand, you need to identify, you need to go through the process of understanding what your brand stands for. And again, casting your mind back to the research section that we did, we spent time and effort, and we collected information via multiple means from mixed methods. Yes, it was a big caddy survey, but we spent time speaking to people one-on-one, interviews with key stakeholders across our sector, across NGOs, across agencies, across government, across local governments, the people that we knew that one day would be part of this movement, to understand what was true and valuable to them. And this is what we came up with: 5 key brand values and a key message. And as you do when you prepare for conferences and presentations like this, you reflect back on what you did and where you've come to. And we were really proud to see that these values that really you come up with without really knowing where you're going to go. You've got a good understanding. You've got your research, you've got your gut to say, you know what, this feels right. And we look back on it now and say, you know what, we're still going. These are still ringing true. But again, it's not through accident that these values are standing the test of time. It's because we spent the time doing the research. We spent the time looking through the eyes of our citizens, our stakeholder groups, and understanding their world. And suddenly, we found ourselves with a big value proposition of creating a healthier Victoria. It's hard, really, to not agree with that statement. And what we've found, and we've worked with some very hard agencies with who face really tough social issues, whether it's sexual health, whether it's eating disorders, whether it's mental health, whether it's suicide. But the one common element that we all seem to agree on very early on when we all come together is, you know what? We are coming together to create a healthier state. We are contributing to that one message, which is such a powerful point when you're looking at brand. The fourth takeout is create your coalitions. Coalitions are so important. Coalitions are so important, and the reason why we came here today, or why I'm really standing here today, it's because we reached out. So many people in this room have contributed to this conversation, to this talk. One example of that is the process that we follow and that we identified very early on from the National Social Marketing Centre and their work. It may look like a linear process, but what we've done, or there is important to this process, is the feedback loops, the interactions that happen between the stages. By working together, by identifying your stakeholders, and again, kind of coming back to even the first takeout of understanding what social marketing is, that's what you're doing in your scoping phase. What are we here to do? What is our common purpose, our common vision, and how are we going to deliver that? Now, you can do that by taking a product or a campaign or a health promotion effort off the shelf and putting it into delivery or somewhere. But the important thing is we try not to skip a step, because it's that step that together you start to create and you start to challenge your part in what the program and what the effort is trying to achieve. Only last week, I was actually in a meeting with the eating disorder and mental health folk. In fact, talking about Live Lighter. It was going to be an unnamed campaign, but seeing as it's been put up, we can talk to it directly. But these stakeholders are really challenging the role of campaigns as part of a public health systems approach intervention. Well, actually, they were just talking about how a campaign can impact social change. At times they didn't understand, or certainly their starting point wasn't Healthy Together Victoria, wasn't that big systems effort that's going on in Victoria. But suddenly, as the conversation changed, and they saw that the social marketing campaign, that element, that mass media that was on there only 6 weeks out of the 6 months that we've been together for, or on and off really, and the spikes in web visitations, the spikes in knowledge, all key insights that told us that this campaign is working in Victoria, but it's working in Victoria from a campaign perspective. But what else? That's just one little part of the story. And then when they started to understand that there is a much bigger part of the story in Victoria that is happening, then they started to understand and be less critical. Not less critical of the campaign, not less critical of the campaign deliverers, but almost self-reflecting and going, hey, you know what? This is okay, but what's more important is what role do I have to play in this? How can I be part of the solution? Beautiful aha moment, really. I'm just going to take you through 2 key operating principles, our mantras over these last 5 years. Because again, we feel like we're generating knowledge. There's a beautiful evidence base. There's beautiful research out there to tell us the role of social marketing, to give us beautiful definitions, but really, delivering social marketing and complex systems intervention, not so many textbooks that have got that title on the front cover. So what do? We needed to learn by doing. Learning by doing, and I'm a pilot. Now, I'm a pilot, I'm not quite sure if it translates to the international audience, so it means experimentation. It means safe to fail. It means it's okay. And that was such a big blocker. Such a big blocker to the people that really wanted to deliver perfection. Again, we all stand up and we all want to deliver perfection. And you can't blame anyone for that. But what we found is when people started to let go of the insecurities and started to understand that it's okay to make a mistake, then we started to deliver change. Then we started to finally experience the power of what we were on about. And I used to joke, actually, in fact, I should take a moment to acknowledge a very key contributor to this story, and it's Stephanie Morris. Stephanie's not here today, but she was critical. She was critical to driving these efforts, particularly within the 12 Healthy Together communities. And we used to joke that I would give Stephanie, as well as the 12 Healthy Together communities, a t-shirt with I'm a pilot written on it, just to remind everyone that it was okay, because once they got over that blocker, then we started to see things change. Actually, before I move on, there was one thing. The process was the initiator of that change. Like I said, like I reflected back onto that Live Lighter stakeholder meeting, what happened, and when people started to understand that it was okay to learn by do, that it was okay to start making mistakes, but importantly, it's very important to keep moving on. The processes facilitated that. The principles facilitated that. The social marketing definition facilitated that because it gave us permission. It gave us a reason to bring all these key people together in a room. And like someone said, social marketing is, to a certain point, sexy. People want to get involved in delivering social marketing. It's got a tool, it's got a power that brings people from all across your stakeholder groups together in a room. I mean, I'm not quite sure if they'd be so excited talking about budgets and bottom lines and, the impacts that we're having. But social marketing has the ability to bring people together, and our processes, our principles then showed us, they were a guiding light. They were a guiding light around how we could bring big social change and show people the role that they had to play. Which brings us to the capture and cultivate knowledge. So important. So important because it sees us grow. Knowledge creation and knowledge capture is not a static thing. We live, we breathe it, we're doing it. We do it every day, we're doing it here, obviously. Conferences, presentations, but importantly, you do it when you get back to your office. Use what you learn over the next couple of days. Use what you've learned, obviously, throughout your whole career and really bring it together. Very powerful. For us, you can bring your knowledge capture into some very key documents, some very key tools, some very key research. But what's important is that you have it. But once you have it, it's not static. You develop it, you challenge it. We are happy to have those difficult conversations because without those difficult conversations, you are not going to learn. You're not going to learn, you're not going to challenge yourself, so we need to have them. Which brings us back to this diagram, to the foresight map of obesity. But what's important, and what I don't see very often in conferences, is the next part, is what we're doing, is how the hell do you populate a population health intervention targeted obesity against that. Now this is like a tenth of what we're doing in Victoria. It's messy, it's complicated. So we must be doing something right because that's a definition of a wicked problem. There's no one solution. There's no one problem. There's lots of solutions. But what's important there is we need to understand the impacts that they're having at each particular point, at each particular node, which comes back to our evaluation, our research, our monitoring, continual cycles of learning, learning by doing. Don't be afraid to fail, experiment. Because once we start to see things intervening and having effect, then we can create scale. We've got the resources, we've got the tools, we captured them, we're cultivating them. So suddenly we can start to look at delivering at scale across population groups, across all these various segments that seems theoretical at first, but you know what? We can do it. So to close, or kind of coming to the end, the story in Victoria is now a point where we talk about leadership. Leadership at all levels. Leadership at a community level, leadership at an organisational level. Speaking to the Cokes of the world, speaking to the McDonald's of the world. We need to act together if we are to have any help or hope of intersecting and really challenging this complex system of obesity. So Rick, if you wouldn't mind.
Good health is important for everyone, and opportunities to improve our health are all around us. As a connected individual, you can make positive and lasting changes within your family and among your friends, neighbours and colleagues to enjoy a better quality of life. Whether it's at your work, in your children's school, at your local sporting club or in your community, you can make a big difference. By leading change across our many environments, we can have a positive impact on the health and well-being of the entire community. At Healthy Together Victoria, we're bringing people together in a united effort for better health. Through policies, initiatives and partnerships, we're creating a movement that is driving healthy change. By working together, we can create a healthier Victoria. To find out what you can do, visit healthytogether.vic.gov.au.
So just to finish, is a quick eye on the future. Because we're actually all striving to achieve this complex systems approach for obesity, we're actually gaining international recognition. Gaining international recognition from the governments in New Zealand, in Public Health Wales, in England, by taking a lot of the research, a lot of the findings that they are driving, their academics are driving this. The people that understand systems are driving this, but what's happening at the moment is we are the people that are actually putting into action. And it's a really powerful and proud moment for us to stand and say we are talking to them, because this is another example of scale. Scale is not only statewide, scale is not only national, but scale is the world. Which brings me back again to that first point. Why the hell would a government person be putting a Martin Luther King quote in his presentation? It's because we want to change the world, and I'm proud to do that. And my parting comment is we all have the power to change the world. So as social marketers, let's not forget that. Let's not forget how we can work together within our coalitions, within our communities, to understand and grow this powerful concept called social marketing to create change. Thank you.
Okay, and we've got time for one question or one comment. Yep, I can see a hand up there.
Thank you. I was wondering if you could share any of your impact data from all of these efforts.
We're collecting, the impact data is a good question. We've got a baseline study that's coming out in a couple of months. And then because it is a complex and wicked problem, it's a complex and wicked problem to evaluate, and it takes time. So we can't cover everything, obviously, in half an hour or 40 minutes. So what we've done, in a nutshell, is we've got a major evaluation and research project that looks on how to evaluate complex systems approaches. So we've just completed the first part of that, which is the baseline study. We now have to, the next stage of that study will be in a couple of years, in about 18 months, I think it is. And then at that point, then we can start putting figures on the table. But in terms of how do we know it's working? Because we've got that ever-evolving base of literature that says you should be taking complex systems approaches, you should be creating change. What we're seeing in our communities is we're starting to see a change in the narrative. We're starting to see people actually go to visit supermarkets. We're actually, in fact, one of the great examples was during, I think most people are familiar with The Biggest Loser, not only in the Australian program, but internationally. And The Biggest Loser, after looking for a community, actually found one of our 12 Healthy Together communities. We spent some time wondering whether we should embrace The Biggest Loser in one of our communities. Is it fair? Is it equitable? So we said yes, because it's going to happen. So we used it. And then what happened was that supermarkets actually sold out of fresh fruit and vegetable. For the first time, I mean, we're talking probably one of the biggest and at-risk population groups in Victoria, in fact, nicknamed Fatarat for Ararat. But they sold out. So in terms of evaluation, we've got lots of antidotes to say that it's working, but really like hardcore evidence, that's coming.
Join me in thanking Roberto for that presentation.